Kill him here, kill him here. This is where we win it. Super finisher! This is it, this is our time, this is our time, this is our time. They're melting on it, they're melting on it.
First of all, I'll start in static, because that's typically actually how I start fights. So I'll go from static to fire to earth and then back to water if possible. And by that time, you know, most of my cooldowns are kind of done and I can kind of start that rotation again. So the reason I start in static, or excuse me, the reason I start in air is actually for the static. A lot of times, you know, you run along and you come across an enemy Zerg and you get all stacked up tight and they get all stacked up tight and you're about to push, inevitably you get staticked and now you're standing behind while your Zerg is up ahead and you've suddenly got the melee train about to hit you. That's basically what you want to happen, but on your on their side and not happening to you. So typically in fights, what I'll do is, you know, as we're grouping up to get ready for the push, I'll actually use my blink ability, or excuse me, my lightning flash ability. I'll jump ahead really quick. I'll drop a static on them, and I'll get the heck out of there. Hopefully by that time the raid is pushing, and it's really important to do that. And I'll tell you why. It's all about, so when you're in fights, it's all about this kind of dance, which I'll go into, I'll explain a little more, but the whole goal of dropping your static early is to get their guardians to blow their stability early. So what that means is you drop that static, maybe a couple people get stuck, everyone pops their stability, they run through it so that they can push out. Well, the stability is only 6 seconds. And so what's going to happen is by the time, hopefully, they get to where your melee train is and you start dropping your bomb, their stability is done with, which means that any mobs that are casted in that bomb, they're going to get hit with and they're going to get stuck for the full damage of the bomb that your group just dropped. So static, that's really why it's important to call that out in that situation. You know, again, it just lets the commander know that there may be an opportunity or helps them with the potential stability time of the other group. The other example, of course, is when you're calling for swiftness. You're running along, you want to call forward static, drop it down, and that way people are actually able to blast it. Note that static does have a 3/4 of a second cast time. So you want to try and get up as far as possible. Otherwise, by the time it casts, it's going to be behind the raid. So just a couple other things to touch on really quick while we're in here. Windward speed gives swiftness to your whole group. Again, I think I mentioned this in the last video, but if you coordinate this and some of your blasts right and swift and rotate in and out of air, you can pretty much keep a 100% uptime in swiftness, which is really handy if you're trying to get back to your raid. But it's only 5 targets. Oh, and actually that's something I should talk about really quick too. So it's so important to be in a party when you are in a raid, especially in the world versus world environment. And the reason for that is because any of these boons or abilities are prioritized to party members. So let's say I cast Windward Speed, excuse me, and I'm not in a party, and I've got 30 people around me. Well, it's going to pick 4 other random people to get that ability. Only those 4 people are going to get that. But if I was in a party and somebody cast it, it's going to go to me rather than somebody else, meaning I'm going to be able to keep up with the raid. So same goes with all of those other things, stability, so on and so forth. Gust is really fun. One thing to note is it's directional, so if you cast it and he's standing here, and by the time you're done casting it, he moves over here, it's going straight. But if you're on a bridge or something, and you can cast it and knock them off the bridge, it's absolutely hilarious. So play with that a little bit. Lightning Surge, just a little damage, and it gives blindness, which means their next attack will not hit you. And then I'm going to just mention this once. I might talk about a couple other attunements as well, but always make sure that you're using your one skill. Again, just a little extra damage, get it out there, can really make the difference in a fight. So typically, again, from air, I will go to fire. And the most important thing in here that you want to call out is your Meteor Shower. And so Meteor Shower does a ton of damage, and if you can get 4, 5, 6 LEs casting at the same time, then it does an insane amount of damage. So when you're dropping your bomb, which is typically when you call it when the commander says bomb, 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 or whatever, if you've got a bunch of LEs doing that at the same time, on top of all those Necro Wells and other things that are there, it's just gonna, totally wreck that opposing forces train. But the reason you want to call it is it's again really kind of about timing. So the commander is kind of timing the bombs, timing when the Necro Wells are up, when the LE abilities are up, so that when we push, we've got a fully loaded arsenal of abilities that we can drop on top of them. So that's one of the reasons why it's important to call Meteor Shower. And the other thing that I'll mention too while we're on it is Meteor Shower, especially if you've got blasting staff, which I recommend for anyone doing World vs. World. The meteors in this case, the actual meteors themselves, not the size of the field, but the meteors themselves are so much larger, which is a great ability when you are sieging a tower or something, and they've got arrow carts or whatever. You can run up with your Meteor Shower, drop that, and it's going to pretty much obliterate anything that's on that wall or tower. So let's see. The other couple things I want to mention really quick. So Burning Retreat, super, super, super handy. I mainly use it for the mobility. Those situations where I'm caught out of position, or I just need to get the heck out of there really quickly. Sometimes I'll just jump into the fire tune just for this ability, but it's the GTFO spell is kind of what I call it, because it just gets you the heck out of there. Gets you out of melee range, and for the most part gets you out of casting range too. You just have to turn around, take a couple steps, and you're safe from whatever you're in. It also evades actually too, through whatever field, so super, super handy. Flame Burst, again, self-explanatory. Lava Fonts, incredible ability because the cooldown is so short. Again, in the situations where you are assaulting a tower and they're standing in the walls, you can just basically keep a lava font. Look at how big that field is. You can keep a lava font on that wall pretty much almost 80% of the time, 90% of the time. And what that's going to do is it's going to prevent people from standing on the wall and trying to throw out siege disablers, which is going to allow the enemies there to get there before you get the wall down, or so on and so forth. So lava font, you don't need to call it, but again, very, very useful. A fantastic fire ability. So going into Earth, there's nothing in here so much that you absolutely have to call out. A lot of LAs will call out their mobs, which are these two right here, which can be quite handy. But again, it kind of goes back to that fighting thing I was talking about earlier. It's kind of like a dance, actually. So essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to kill the enemy force. And how do you do that? Well, you can't always just smash into them and obliterate all of them. I mean, sometimes that works well, but typically what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a sizable group of people out of position so that your melee train can hit them, wipe them up, and then move on to the rest of the group. So let's say that we've got an enemy Zerg right here, and they're moving kind of this way, and we're kind of moving this way or whatever. If I'm able to get in a mob, unsteady ground, or a shockwave or something out and grab or stop 2, 3, 4, 5 people, our melee train is going to go in there, they're going to hit them, they're going to wipe them up, and then move on to the rest, and it's going to be that much easier next time we have to hit that enemy Zerg. So again, mobs are very important. A lot of people call them just so that, again, it's kind of a communication thing, so the commander knows that there might be an opportunity to go in and wipe some free kills up. So, just quickly, I'll mention Magnetic Aura. This is fantastic versus Rangers, but melee or anybody else, I mean, pretty much not really worth using. You'll probably see me in fights use this sometimes, but again, if a thief's ganking you or something, you're pretty much SOL if you try and use this as a defensive. Eruption, super handy, just because it has a blast finisher. So you can blast, so you basically place your eruption down, you can put a water field on top of it, or for healing, or frost for the armor, or a static to give yourself swiftness. You just have time a little bit right, but really handy. But the one thing to note is it does have a cast time after you put it down. So if the Zerg again is coming at you and they're over here, you're going to actually want to cast that over here. So by the time they get over to here, it goes off, you get the maximum amount of damage. There are a few spells like that you have to kind of note. And then finally, water. This one is, if you don't call anything, these are pretty much the most important spells to call. Again, if you cast a water field down, it's only going to do 2,500 healing, and then clear a couple of conditions. But if people are actually able to blast it, it's going to do so much more healing. It's going to get the entire raid up to 100%, and again, it's going to make that much easier for you guys to push and win the next fight. So, Healing Rain, again, most people will say big water, or if you're in a water rotation, they'll say water, 1, 2, or 3, or whatever they are. But basically how it works is, obviously you cast it, it goes down, and it clears a condition. If you are in it, you can blast it, it does this little healing thing, and again, it up to 5 times blast. But again, especially with this, what you want to remember is the first field down is blasted. And typically you want to use your water in situations where you're just about to go in and drop a bomb. I again try and use my lightning flash to stay up at the front of the raid, so that just as we're jumping into the enemy, I will cast a Healing Rain, and as our melee train is landing in it, our guardians with their hammers, etc., warriors with their warhorns, as they're landing and doing those big damaging and mobilization abilities, they're also blasting that field and keeping the full health. So any kind of bomb that the enemy did is going to be negated just because of that. So very important. Healing Rain, you always want to try and cast it as we're going in, just right before we drop our bomb, because again, it's the first field down is what is reacted upon. Frozen Ground, again, it can be kind of used in the same instance. Instead of healing people, it'll actually give a frost armor, which is really handy. So what I like to do is, I actually like to especially use this as the enemy Zerg is retreating. I will switch over to water, and I will cast the Frozen Ground, and it only picks up 5 people. But again, it's that whole dance thing. If we can get 5 people out of position, and it's so much easier to take them down, and then you've just got 5 less people to worry about it in that Zerg. But again, as those 5 people get caught out of position, and our melee train goes into immob them, use their hammers, etc., it's going to blast that field, and it's going to give them that extra frost armor, which, in case the Zerg turns around and hits them, they're just going to be totally prepared to take whatever damage comes in. So you don't necessarily have to call this one, but it's quite handy. I usually I'll call like a chill or a froster or whatever, and that kind of lets people know. And then finally, Geyser. So Geyser is typically your regroup spell. So everyone's gone in, they've done their bomb, everyone's kind of scattered, they come back, everyone's stacked back on the tag. He or she would usually call for an Empower, and that's when you want to drop your Geyser. And what that does is basically gets everybody in the raid healed up again, and allows people to blast it. It is short though, 2-second duration, so you want to call your Geyser just before you start to cast it. Again, so it gives people time to get their blasting abilities ready to actually combo that field. And again, Water Blast, your one skill, especially in your water, you want to cast this because it will heal you and everybody around you as you're running, in addition to doing damage to any enemies that you're actually hitting with it. So it's kind of like a super regeneration. Those are kind of the important spells. That's what you do with them, how they work. I can go into more detail about water rotations later, but pretty much you know, that's what you need to know. It's kind of tricky to go into these and know exactly when to use them. It's just something you kind of pick up over time. But again, you know, just get out there, get in World vs. World, jump in TeamSpeak or Mumble or whatever you guys use, and follow the commander. It's just so much more fun when you do things that way. So that wraps up part 2 of the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll have the next one soon. Thank you.